Welcome today to Pointing at the Moon. And today I'm going to interview Diego Villasenor. And the tables are turned on this one. So let's see how it goes.
It's funny being on the other side of this for once.
You know, it's very interesting. I met you before you came here, many years ago, in fact. And you were still in college, I believe, at that time. And you said that you wanted to come here and practice, and I thought you were just talking, because a lot of people come and just talk. Could you tell us how then you wound up here at the Providence Zen Center? Because you were just a student in Florida, right?
Yes, so it's funny. My parents were really convinced that I'd become a Catholic priest when I grew up. That's what they wanted from me. Or maybe not want, but they really were pretty sure, yeah, he's going to go become a Catholic priest. So we went to church every Sunday. You know, I went to CCD and kind of did my Catholic education. I remember that's where we learned our prayers, and I remember I have a distinct memory of, as a test, being taken out into the hallway in private, like having to repeat all the prayers from heart and like do it kind of correctly. And it's actually kind of funny. I remember afterwards I came in, the teacher said, Diego is the only one who did his prayers while actually praying. None of the rest of you did that, kind of thing. I was a stressed out child even then, because I was a good child and I was okay in school. So I always had the sense that people wanted something from me. They wanted me to, you know, live up to a certain expectation of behavior. They always wanted me to be smarter and to do good things and great things. And that felt like a lot, because I didn't know if I could do any of that. And what I found, and the seed that kind of took root in me from that Catholic upbringing, from going to church, was this idea that God loves you just as you are. And what that seed was for me is, there was a space where no one was expecting anything from me. No one was expecting me to be any better or any different than how I was. And I thought that was really, and I couldn't articulate it at the time, but I felt it was just really important that spaces and things like that existed that we could offer people. It was during that time that I was at the library reading, and I found a book on Buddhism. And I found that everything it was describing were things that I already sort of had going on in my head. This essential notion that the thing that I need to work with isn't trying to go out and change the world, but how do I work with my own mind? And like, how does that give rise to everything else? And I found that to really deeply resonate with me, because I felt like I couldn't be in control of anything else as much as people wanted me to. And so that's when I started meditating, and I kind of started practicing. And you know, now I recognize there's no such thing as a good or a bad meditator, but boy, I was a bad meditator. It was absolutely for like, oh yes, look at me, I'm meditating, I'm so great and spiritual now, yada yada yada. And this was like high school, middle school, well before college kind of thing.
Oh, okay.
After a while, eventually all the things I was reading suggested I should probably sit with a group. So I started sitting with a Japanese Soto group, and they were pretty strict on the forms. It really, no moving, like 30, 40-minute sits, extremely slow walking, chanting in all the Japanese. And that was around the time that I was in college. It was also during the time that I was in college where I became part of the interfaith community in college. Not because I was interested in interfaith, but because it was the only way for me to live in the apartments on campus while being like a freshman, sophomore. So I did it so I could get the nice housing, not for the religious aspect. But through there, I ended up meeting a Catholic priest. No, not Catholic, Anglican. And he was part of this radio show called The Three Wise Guys in Florida. And it was a priest, a rabbi, and imam talking faith and spirituality. And, he and I got talking one day, and we really started getting along. And so he mentioned to me that, hey, I know a Japanese Zen priest, and I know you're exploring like being a monk or like becoming clergy. How about I set up a lunch for you? And this guy's name, I kid you not, was Michael Moriarty. And Michael actually used to be part of the Kwan school of Zen before going over to the Japanese tradition. And during this lunch, he told me, hey, we have a sitting group here in Orlando that's closer to you than this Japanese one, which was like 50 minutes away. Go practice with them and see how you like it. And that's when I showed up to the Orlando Zen Center. And there was Claudia doing Kwan Boso chanting. Claudia Shippert, a senior Dharma teacher, was the abbot down there. And Claudia saw that I was coming fairly regularly and that I was fairly involved. And she knew that I was really trying to explore, like, what am I doing with my life while trying to keep this practice I found helpful as like one of the cores of it. And so she said, Diego, did you know there are scholarships to go up to Providence Zen Center for Buddha's birthday? And she absolutely thought it was important for me to come up here to the head temple and kind of see it and experience it for myself. So I was very excited by the opportunity, and also because I was exploring being a monastic at that point in my life. And so she thought it was very important I come up here and actually talk to a monastic. So we flew up on Southwest together, and I think I must have been barely over 21 at that point. So like 8-9 years ago or something like that. And I remember my first experience being up here, and I was just so blown away that a place like this existed in the United States of America. I had never seen a Buddhist temple of this size in America before, let alone a Buddhist temple where I didn't encounter a cultural and language barrier kind of going into it, which I enjoyed the temples I visited down in Florida, but that aspect to it, being a shy, insecure college student, made it take a lot of courage to try and go back to that kind of thing. So I was really blown away that this place kind of existed, and both with the place that so was here and also the sincerity of everyone I got to encounter and talk to at that weekend. The school was a lot bigger than I thought it was, and our tiny little Orlando Zen Center kind of coming up here. And so I just really had this sense of, wow, I want to live here. I want to be part of this community. And at the time, I think Mark Houghton was one of the abbots at the time. And I remember talking to Mark, and I was like, so I'm really interested in moving up here, but, I don't know how I'm going to find a job because, I'm just a young college student kind of thing, or like how I'd be able to sustain myself. And I was secretly sort of hoping that Mark would be like, we can help you out. Don't worry. We'll give you a month or two to find a job, or here's places you can look. And he just sort of shrugged it off and said, yeah, that's a problem kind of thing. And then that barrier of that, maybe not that barrier, but that fear of just moving someplace without any kind of guaranteed employment was kind of that big stickler for me at the time. For me, there's always been a big place inside of me, and both in my practice, where I don't ever want to be a burden to others. And especially with the reverence that I hold Providence Zen Center, and I didn't want to come into it with okay, now provide for me kind of thing. I wanted to come here and be helpful and not, take resources in return. So I stayed down there and I continued working and living in Florida for a while. And since I wasn't able to move up here, I moved into the Orlando Zen Center to still have that Zen Center experience. And that's where I did my training to become a Dharma teacher, and eventually was the head Dharma teacher down there for a while. And that was a great experience because I was the only resident there for about half the time. So I didn't get to, during that upbringing, be able to hide in my room or avoid things. It really was literally just me. If I didn't show up, it didn't happen, sort of thing. And that was really useful and really important at that time period. A lot of what I did was some stuff with the Interfaith Council of Central Florida. So going to kind of churches and introducing and talking about Buddhism in interreligious settings. I remember going to a retirement home once to talk about ethics, whatever that is in Buddhism. And among signing imam and a priest and all that sort of thing as well. Then I'd also, because I was young, I was also invited to go to colleges as well to kind of speak and kind of relate to their students and that sort of thing as well. So that was kind of that sphere that I was a little bit more involved with.
And since you were alone, how did the retreats go down there? Or did you do retreats?
We did. So we did a monthly long sit from 9 to 3, which was similar to our like one-day retreats up here, just a little bit shorter, and we didn't have a teacher as a part of it either. Sometimes we'd have a senior Dharma teacher who would do consulting interviews, but the main thing we did was just 4 sits in the morning, lunch in the formal style, couple sits in the afternoon, and then some chanting sort of thing.
So sitting is like a meditation. What are you doing, like 25, 35 minutes?
4:30-minute sessions in the morning.
4:30 minutes.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. So that was kind of our regular long practice. We didn't have daily practice. We would have chanting on Tuesday, Thursday nights, and then morning practice Monday through Friday. And then we'd have a Sunday program as well at the end of the day. So it wasn't like here where we had every single night, every single day, and then retreats kind of on top of it. It was a little bit more staggered down there. But the big thing to do formal retreats meant that we had to, usually one of two things happened. We would do it in somebody's house. We did it a couple of times at Claudia's house. We just like cleared everything out of her living room, set up a lot of cushions, and squeezed like 13, 14 people in there, sort of thing. Or we would go down to South Florida at Bohyun-sa, the Korean temple down there, and they would do at least 4 3-day YMJJs a year. And so because there were only 4 of them, I always tried to make sure to go to every single one. And so my first experience with retreats was 3-day long retreats.
Oh, okay.
I never did like a 1-day before that. Before it was right in for a 3-day. Thankfully, the first time I went, someone else drove me, so I didn't get the option to leave if I wanted to. Yeah.
And so then you have a job, so you didn't want to be a burden to people, so you got a job, and up here you are working with that job, but it's also quite stressful.
So I'm at a point where I have found the balance between my work, my practice, my personal life, and my hobbies to have completely kind of fallen out of sync with each other, which is a really interesting and terrifying stage of life that I'm going through with my practice as a result of it, because I hadn't encountered it before. This is the first time that I've encountered stress on this level from a job. And I can only imagine how much worse I would be if I didn't have a long history of practice behind me to kind of work with this mentally. But yes, the work and kind of the life situation involves a lot of stress. And I don't think that's unique to me. I think that's something everyone is encountering a lot these days. I feel like we're just a really stressed out society at the end of the day. And so because of all that, it's important, I find, for me, to try and keep my circumstances lined up so that while I'm trying to let this settle and resolve itself, that I'm not going to find myself falling in a pit at the end of the day or anything like that. Because there's a lot of people who, when things start to get destabilized and unbalanced, you know, when they're working through all of their attachments and mental energy, it really, really, they find ways of getting out of it which only make it worse. You know, drinking, drugs, alcohol, sex, whatever. So for me right now, what this means is, how do I make sure that I keep a relationship with my practice in my Zen Center? So I'm living here at the end of the day. Sure. And if I wasn't living here, how can I make sure that I keep connected to it, so as this balances out, it's still there, alive, and kind of waiting for me at the end of the day.
I heard a teacher, it was George Bowman, in fact, he said that, and he would leave, sometimes he'd leave for a few years at a time, but he said when he came back and he sat, it was like he was meeting his brother.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it was a very comforting feeling to come back and have a seat, but, he did it when he was ready. So, and I think, especially as a layperson, there are times when you have to take time off. But always to get back into it. And when you're not actually doing formal practice, do you find that you're doing something, or what do you think?
Yeah, so a couple interesting thoughts about that. One of the things I've really noticed about my own karma and the ideas that I attach to is I really attach to certain ideas of my expectations and roles for myself. Like I have a certain standard for myself I'm always kind of holding myself accountable to, and then I drive myself crazy trying to hold myself to that standard and accountability. So seeing that appears so clearly right now and working with letting that go, dropping that energy so I can just be with this disjunction and let it kind of process and resolve itself on its own has really been the heart of that practice. And even though the kind of formal practice isn't every single morning and every single night like I used to be, I still do need to practice. I usually around 2 to 3 o'clock each day, I'll go do 108 bows up in the upstairs Dharma room because clear the mind real fast when I'm spending all day thinking on the computer. Sure. It's a real quick way to just right back to this moment. And I always set up at least 15, 20 minutes in my room to sit a little bit, at least once per day. It's not at a specific time as much as it used to be, but I'm trying to keep that maintained because it is helpful. Having that space to just kind of look at that without pushing it away or hanging on to it, and even without judging it, I find just to be incredibly helpful for that process of letting it unfold, if that kind of answers your question.
Sure it does.
Yeah.
And orientation. Yeah. I love doing orientation. That's one of the things I love to do.
Yeah, I do too.
And I started in like 2001 in Korea. And basically what they did is they gave me a class and they said you had to take care of, you had to do the orientation and do the sitting with them. And then sometimes you had to, sometimes I had to do the talk too, so I do all of that, and I learned how to do that. But one of the things that really stands out in our school that I really pride myself in knowing how to talk about is this don't know mind, this before thinking mind, and so this don't know mind is before you think, and so an easy way to talk about. So I would say to people that, well, listen to this. And then I'd say, did your mind say clap? Did it say smack? And then so I ask you, did your mind say slap or smack or clap? So he knows. But
no, it didn't.
Yeah, but yes, the answer is no, it didn't. So, but the answer he did was very good, that first answer. So, and of course, then I ask you, why? How come that your mind didn't do that? Then I'd ask you that. How come?
Oh, I don't know. I just heard the sound and I knew that.
Yeah, you'd be surprised. There's a lot of people would not know, but you'd be surprised how many people actually know, and they would say, "Because I just heard it."
Yep.
And that's just that. You just heard it. Well, I tell them that's your before thinking mind. And so that's and that's what we call your don't know mind, your spiritual self, this before thinking mind. And so our job when you come into the Dharma room is that everybody is just returning to this before thinking mind. And then when you return to this before thinking mind and you keep it long enough, for longer periods of time, it changes. It changes to clear mind. So then the floor is brown, the clothes are gray. I'm sitting here talking to you. And you don't have all these filters. So you see things as they are. So that's truth. And then one more step is necessary. How do you, what do you think that step is?
How can I help?
Okay, good. So that's kind of like the gist of it, with me for practicing. Of course, you talk about the sitting. I think that's your strong point is you're explaining the actual physical sitting. I whooped through that too fast.
I find the thing that's most rewarding about doing orientation is introducing Don't Know Mind to the first time to people, to let them know there is something you have that is before your thinking. And like, that is so rewarding to be able to share with people, because you can see when people come in how they've like tied themselves up in knots with their thinking, and you can just say, hey, look, there's something that's past that, and you can practice and wake up with it. And so introducing that to them as well is one of the most rewarding things about it. And I do like to spend a little bit of time on the story of the Buddha as well as how to meditate as well, both to try and express a lot of the things that I wish people told me at the beginning, especially that, and you encounter this, there's a lot of people who say, oh, I'm a bad meditator, my mind's too busy, yada, yada. And I love to tell people there is no such thing as good or bad meditation. There's just your experience, and are you able to show up for it without pushing it away or hanging on to it? Sometimes you'll have crazy mind meditation where you're barely able to come back. Other times you'll be very clear, very quick. No problem. Just showing up for it is the best part. And it's so rewarding to be able to just introduce that and share that with people all the time.
Yes. I understand sometimes you go over. It's
The
supposed to
time
be
period.
35 minutes.
And I go into like 40, 50
You get 40,
usually.
50 minutes, you're still over there yakking.
Well, I like to give people the chance to ask questions. And I like to give people individual attention with their sitting form as well, to try and help them find that stability and that comfort and let them know they can stand up and bound, that kind of thing. Because it's one thing just to show people how to sit. It's another one to say, try sitting in the kneeling style. How does that feel and how does that work for you? And then they're like, oh, this is way better than cross-legged sort of thing. So yeah, I do like to give people that extra time because this is for a lot of people, their first introduction to this. And I think, and I don't know, but I think that sometimes it can be a little bit intimidating. First of all, showing up to something new in a place you don't recognize with a bunch of strangers is hard and intimidating, and those people did it. And then on top of that, I feel like taking them from that into this huge room with this giant gold Buddha and candles and the Tenghua, and to see all these people in robes sitting there quietly, maybe it's a little intimidating and scary. So I like to give them that extra time, that introduction, so that not only do they feel more comfortable and have that foundation to them, but also so that they can get to know and spend time with each other as well. Because when you have a group of new people, if they're comfortable and they sort of feel that with each other, they're going to kind of support each other. And then they're going to bring themselves back. And then they're going to start to recognize each other. And so I feel like it helps build the Sangha, just letting them have a foundation, but also be a group together before unleashing them on kind of everyone else, if that makes sense.
One of the things that I really think is important is to be able to give them something that they could take with them.
Oh, yeah.
And so, because, at the end of the day, a lot of those folks don't come back. Yeah. And so you want to give them something. So I would sometimes teach a simple way of doing the sitting, the breathing practice. Breathe in, clear mind, without count.
Don't know.
So the count, So somebody will tell me that they're not going to come back, or that they just want to learn some meditation. That happens actually quite often. I see that this person isn't coming back. I would breathe in, clear mind, without count, and then go up to 10. And when you get to 10, come back. And then I would say that if you do this every day for 20 minutes, everything's going to appear in your mind. Good thoughts, bad thoughts, opinions, ideas, likes, dislikes. And so it's very important. If you learn anything today, is that when you're sitting there and these things, this whatever appears in your mind, good thoughts, bad thoughts, whatever, you don't hold on to it and you don't push it away. If you don't hold on to it and you don't push it away, then it'll have less of a hold on you. And that's just a very common kind of thing. In fact, what I'll do is that I'll say in the beginning, because I have a lot of those kinds of little things to say. As I said, does anybody here not know about the Buddha? And somebody will raise their hand. And actually, sometimes I even forget to say that. But then, and they'll say, no, I don't know the Buddha. So I tell them a real quick story, about like 2 or 3 minutes. And I say, if you want to learn any more, you can Google the Buddha, and you're going to get all his whole life story. But I wanted to show you some stuff that is you're not going to find on the internet. And yeah, like that.
So I like to spend a little bit of time on the story of the Buddha, not for the story itself, but because it's my way of inviting them to relate and wake up to their don't know. Because the story of the Buddha is really just the human story. This man had a life, and then he had this point where he recognized, what I am doing is not working for me anymore. And in fact, I am miserable and this is killing me. I need to do something different. And he tried all of these different things, and he couldn't answer this, whatever expression of his own existential angst was. And so he went to practice before he understood something about himself, that don't know. And that's everyone's story. A lot of people, very few people come to Zen, as you know, because their lives are going great.
Yeah, so people come in and expect to find everybody perfect, and no.
And so I like the story of the Buddha because it is our story. It's the story of, this isn't working. I need to do something different. And that's what brings people here. And then the story tells them, yeah, there's a way to do this. And then we give them the thing to take home, the don't know, and how to practice with that.
I think for me, what I'll do is I'll actually talk about the Buddha sitting and kind of like what happened. And so then what is Zen? For us, I say, what is Korean Zen? But what is Zen? Zen is understanding yourself and helping others. And the Buddha did, what the Buddha did when he sat under this tree was just that. He understood himself, he understood the universe, and from there he helped others. And then I'll go into the technique of his practicing. The Buddha didn't talk about how great his practice was, but instead he showed people technique about how to practice. And there's one very important point, third point that I like to make, and that is that you would agree with me that everybody has a spiritual self, right? So we all have a spiritual self. All ethnicities have explored this spiritual self. There's one thing that we don't have, and we don't have the corner on enlightenment.
Right. Nope.
So
Nope.
I kind of go from there.
One last thing I'll say about Buddha's enlightenment that I like sharing with people is, I always love sharing this, is that the Buddha, when he woke up, he didn't wake up because he spent 6 years studying text and scripture.
Sure.
And I like to let people know that's good news for us. That means we don't have to be smart to understand who we are. When the Buddha woke up, he didn't receive some divine revelation from a power outside himself. God did not descend upon him and said, "You are now enlightened." That's good news for us too, because it means we don't have to be these saints or holy people to understand who we are. He just looked inward. And everyone is capable of doing that. And I love sharing it out with people, let them know you don't have to be smart. You don't have to be a saint. You just have to look inward, kind of thing. That's another thing I love sharing about that story. Kwan, Haeng, Sunim, thank you so much for joining me this morning.
You're welcome.
And thank you all for listening. This has been Pointing at the Moon, our conversations here at the Peace Pagoda at Providence Zen Center. If you'd like to help support us, you can do so financially online through providencezen.org and leaving a donation for us. Our entire practice schedule is online as well, and we welcome and invite you to come and practice and encounter the Dharma here at Providence Zen Center. If you're not local to the area, check out Quantum School of Zen online. You'll be able to find a Zen center that is close and accessible to you. And if not, we have a vibrant online sangha that you'll be able to connect with. So thank you again.